Good afternoon, and
Sorry, Jeremy. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Horizonte Minerals PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all of the questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet company dashboard, and we will notify you by email when these are ready for your review. Before we begin, I would like to submit the following poll, and if you could give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. And I'd now like to hand you over to CEO Jeremy Martin. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon. I was getting a little bit carried away there. Good afternoon and welcome to our annual general meeting presentation. I'm Jeremy Martin, CEO.
I'm Simon Retter, the CFO.
We'd like to start the presentation this afternoon with a short video clip highlighting our groundbreak event that we had on site last week. And it just gives you a flavour of the level of activity, and then we will return to our presentation update.
That we're here today to celebrate our transition from a developer into construction.
Mais uma vez, agradeço imensamente a presença de todos vocês.
We at Horizonte are absolutely committed to the communities that we work within, that we ensure that you benefit from us being here, and that everything that we do is sustainable and that we can be proud of.
The official groundbreaking event for the Araguaia Nickel Project, marking 10 years since the original discoveries were made by myself and the Horizonte team.
Ele avança, ele vai além da mineração e avança já na transformação mineral.
E hoje eu me emociono por saber que minha cidade vai se transformar num polo.
I think it's been a very busy year for the company. Obviously, a number of you will have seen the news that we've put out over the last 12 months, but I think it's worth just highlighting what has been achieved. Obviously, the main highlight for the year was the closing of the full financing package for Araguaia, $633 million. It was a large, complex financing transaction. We had 5 international lenders, we had 2 ECAs, we brought in 3 key cornerstone shareholders, and it was one of the largest mining finance in the junior market for the last 10 years. So we were very pleased to get that transaction closed. As part of the financing, we obviously required an offtake. We were able to negotiate a market rate offtake for 10 years with Glencore, which was a great achievement. As you've just seen in the video, we started construction, led by our groundbreak ceremony on the 18th. We've awarded a number of our key equipment and services contracts, the furnace, the EPCM, the earthworks. Late last year, we announced the purchase of the Votorantim process plant. This was a fairly unique transaction. It's basically a mirror copy to Araguaia Line 1. It was partially installed. Much of the equipment is still in the vendor's original packaging, and this will be a major source of equipment for Line 2 and key spares for Line 1. We've also evolved our board. We've obviously been predominantly an exploration-facing company until now. We're now adjusting and aligning our board with individuals that have got experience in building and operating mines, and we're very pleased to welcome Dr. Gillian Davidson and Vincent Benoit. And we're also very pleased to have published our 3rd sustainability report last Friday. So it's been a very busy year and a very successful year in terms of what's been achieved. I'm going to hand over to Simon to give a bit of an overview on the nickel market.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. All of you are shareholders or potentially interested in being shareholders in Horizonte, so I'm sure you've read a lot of column inches about the nickel market, which has had a lot of press coverage recently on the back of electric vehicle demand, record low inventories that we're seeing, which has been exacerbated by the Ukraine crisis and sanctions that have been subsequently imposed. This has led to a real step change in the fundamentals of the nickel market, and we're currently seeing pricing in the mid $20,000 per ton. And this compares very favorably to the nickel price environment when we actually set about undertaking the feasibility study for the project, which was at about $13,000 a ton. So the market is very robust. The demand picture is currently 3.1 million tons expected in 2022, which is increasing at 7% year on year. Adding to that the additional gigafactories and the very rapid switch to electrification of the vehicle market, as well as battery storage throughout the globe, and it all paints a very strong demand picture, which ties in very favourably for our timeline to come into production. Nickel, as I've mentioned just then, it's a critical metal. The Araguaia project will produce ferronickel, and nickel is instrumental in the battery sector. But as well as that, it's also very key in the whole of the renewable sector by its predominant portion making up stainless steel. So wind turbines, hydropower, nuclear power generation, all of the infrastructure revolving around electrification is very dependent upon nickel. So we're really seeing, as I mentioned, an increase in column inches and interest from generalist investors as well as specialist battery funds into the sector, which is very positive for the position that we find ourselves in.
So another key part of our journey is our sustainability and how we're driving our environmental stewardship around the project. I think if we look at the three sort of key areas where we play, obviously the first is the environmental. We will be one of the lower GHG emitters for nickel produced, and that's predominantly because we have access to hydroelectric power. Much of the nickel produced today is coming from Indonesia, China, where it's predominantly coal, oil-fired power, and that will play very strongly into offering a high-grade, low-impurity, low-GHG product from Araguaia. Water, we will recycle over 90% of our water at Araguaia. And also we have a large biodiversity action plan in place. We aim to create a number of biodiversity corridors around the project and rehabilitate degraded areas. In terms of our people and our communities, we intend to be a major local employer. Today, around 36% of our employees come from Pará. We intend to lift that level as we move through construction and into operation. We're a diverse employer. Over 30% of our Brazilian workforce is female, and we aim to increase that level. And we're very proud to say we've had 0 fatalities, LTIs on the project to date. It's our objective that all of our workers go to work and come home safe. And in terms of what the project will deliver in terms of socioeconomic drivers for the region, in the 30-year mine life, Araguaia will deliver over $700 million of taxes, direct employment. It's going to be a major capacity building initiative between the company and the state institutions. And it's also going to supply or be a major local procurement partner to a number of local suppliers. So we see part of our drive as we build Araguaia around all these core principles so that our stakeholders value and deliver value from Araguaia. We've talked a little bit about the CO2 per content per ton of Araguaia, and the graph here just shows a number of nickel operations globally. On the far right-hand side, you have the nickel that's coming out of Indonesia and China, and that's running somewhere 70 to 75 tons of CO2 per ton of nickel. We are targeting being down at around 14 tons of CO2 per ton of nickel, and that will put us at the lower quartile, one of the lowest producers globally. And that's a major differentiator going forwards. We're already seeing European customers focused on emissions, and we see potentially a premium developing for our product in the market going forwards. That evolution of the board, we were obviously very pleased to announce the appointment of Dr. Gillian Davidson. Gillian has worked at Tech initially, so she's worked in the mining space. She was then chair or head of mining at the World Economic Forum, and now chairs a number of Battery Alliance initiatives and sits on a number of tier 1 boards. So very pleased to have her on board. And Vincent Benoit is La Mancha's representative. Vincent has been through the whole evolution and development of Endeavour Mining from a 200 million market cap company to over 6 billion today. And you'll see our board evolve further as we bring additional skills into the company as we move through the construction and into operation phase. So if we look at the project itself, again, it's been a busy year. We've built out our owners team. 12 months ago, our owners team was probably around 30 people. We're over 100 today. We've built out an operational readiness plan. All of our key permits have been advanced. We've got our power line. Long lead items have been ordered. We had our groundbreaking ceremony in May, which really marked the start of activities on the ground with the earthworks contractor being mobilised. And as we move into the second half of the year, you'll see the civil works, electromechanical, power line, all the key parts of the project starting to come together. And I'm proud to release our third sustainability report last Friday. We're currently focused on a lot of detailed and engineering design work, and you can see here on the screen just some snapshots across the project. What's interesting here, we're using a fully integrated 3D platform. This allows all of the design elements to come together so the vendors can supply their detailed designs, whether it's a kiln or whether it's a crushing plant. It's integrated into the 3D model, ensure that all the interfaces work, and then material takeoffs are driven out of the model. So it's a very efficient tool to ensure that all of the pieces fit together. It limits the amount of work you have to do on site modifying equipment and ensures that we end up with a smoother process through the design and build stage as we can. A lot of you have been watching this story for a number of years. You will have seen lots of photos of the large open farms with drill rigs on. That's now a thing of the past. You can see here the copper earthworks fleet that's been mobilised to site. On the right-hand side, that's actually the main access route into the process plant, the first sort of workings there. And you'll see over the coming months, the plant will start to appear out of the ground as the works advanced. You've seen the video, a few shots of our groundbreaking event. This was a local event. We had a number of major stakeholders, landowners, mayors from all the local municipalities, representatives from all the state agencies. It really was a fantastic day and really put Araguaia on the map in the region. We're also always conscious of looking at expansion. We've always talked about a second line once we've delivered Araguaia, allowing us to take our annual production up to sort of 28 to 30,000 tonnes. And the acquisition of that Votorantim plant last year was a big step in how we enable that second line. Some of the photos below, you can see the kind of the homogenization shed on the left, furnace crucibles. They're all brand new. They haven't been used. They're the same suppliers that we'll be going to for line 1. And a lot of these pieces will be used in line 2. And it will also provide critical spares for line 1. I mean, originally, it's probably closer to about $150 million spent on this plant, and we've acquired everything for $7 million. So it was a great transaction for Horizonte. This shows the project execution schedule. We're currently sitting in Q2. Obviously, we've delivered on all of our milestones to date, the site groundbreaking, the EPCM, the furnace. The next major contract to be awarded is the civil contract. And then as we move through the year, you can see furnace base plate is a big milestone, power line, water pipeline. And then as we move through next year, completion, and early 24, we start to move towards first metal. So currently we're on track, we're on budget, we're on schedule. Want to highlight our second project, the Vermillion nickel cobalt project. It really is a very high quality asset. It's one of the highest grade undeveloped nickel cobalt projects globally. Obviously, we acquired this off Vale. We released a pre-feasibility study, and you can see the numbers. If we look at today's spot price, it's a little bit below what we're showing in the model here. So nickel today is around $27,000 a ton. So our model is a bit below that. But over the 20 or the 30-year mine life, we're generating over $12 billion of free cash flow, low cost, and this will produce battery grade product to feed into that growing market space. We've completed all of the work streams shown in green. We're currently working on permitting. That's been underway for around 12 months. And we secured a royalty of $25 million with Orion last year. And that allows us to take Vermillion all the way through to full feasibility and full funding. So we anticipate starting the feasibility study in early Q3, and you'll see a number of news streams coming out of Vermillion from updated pilot test work, advances on permitting, and it should be an exciting time for this project. We've had a lot of interest from the overall market in how this evolves. So really, just to conclude the short update today, Horizonte is in an extremely exciting position. It has 100% ownership of two world-class assets, Vermillion and Araguaia. We're fully funded with that $633 million funding package on Araguaia, and we're in construction. You've got to remember, we also have the ability between Vermillion and Araguaia to build out 50 to 60,000 tons of annual nickel production. And at that level, we would be getting close to what Anglo American produces today. So just to put it into context, this is a very significant platform for growth. We're able to benefit from this drive and massive demand that we're seeing in the nickel space, not only from the clean energy transition on the stainless side, but also product from Vermillion to go straight into the battery market. We've got good infrastructure, and also we've got the community support from all of our stakeholders around us. So we've got the projects, we've got the market, we've got the funding. You're going to see a lot of news flow out of the business over the next 12 to 24 months. So thank you very much for listening today. And I think we will move over to some questions that we have.
Jeremy, that's perfect. Simon, thank you very much indeed for your presentation this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab that's situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those questions submitted already, I would like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Jeremy, Simon, as you can see, we have received a number of questions throughout today's presentation, and thank you to all the investors for submitting their questions. If I could please hand back to you just to run through that Q&A tab, and where appropriate to do so, if you could please read out the questions and give your response, and then I'll pick up from you at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got the first question in around political risk and the strengthening of the real. So Simon, would you like to talk about the?
Yeah, sure. I mean, on the political risk front, there are elections coming up at the back end of the year in Brazil. So obviously there may be a change of presidency. We don't really see this as a significant risk for the mining industry in general within Brazil. We've had both governments in power historically. The mining industry in Brazil is a very large contributor to GDP. It's the home of Vale. It's generally perceived to be beyond the realms of political interference. So we see the political risk as fairly low for Brazil, and I think that's shared around the world generally. Is quite a desirable place to have international investment, and you have a lot of majors operating in the same postcode as us. Moving on from that, politics obviously drives foreign exchange markets, and the real has been volatile this year. It weakened with the onset of COVID, along with all emerging market currencies. It is substantially weaker than it was pre-COVID, and that's to do with the overall impact of the pandemic on the economy in general. It's strengthened a little bit recently, but that was predominantly due to technical reasons with large inflows of dollars into the country as a result of the auctioning of new oil blocks within the country. We've seen it settle at around 5, which is pretty good for us. We're comfortable if the real sits at 5. We based our capex estimate on 4.7, and we've also undertaken a hedging program for all of our BRL expenditure as part of the capex build-up, and we received very, very favourable rates as a result of that hedging program. In terms of the operating costs, the operating costs are predominantly driven by power, which is hydro generated in the north of Brazil. That is real denominated, and that's detached from the worldwide markets of coal and or gas or nuclear. So that is very much in our favour, and we've seen power prices stay broadly flat. We're obviously exposed to a small amount of coal as part of the process. So that will have increased, and the bulk of the rest of the operating costs are local currency denominated. So we think the cash costs will have increased slightly, but nowhere near as much as the other operators in places such as Indonesia and China, who are predominantly driven by coal-fired power generation, and that is the single biggest input into the cost build-up of ferronickel operations. So we're very firmly in the lower quartile of the cost curve, and we should have moved further to the left as a result of the increase in commodity prices, and specifically coal and power that you're seeing globally.
Excellent. We've got a second question here which asks about shareholder awareness and how we're going to generate more liquidity in the company. So a good question there. Yeah. I think you will have seen today at the AGM we approved a rollback. This is one of the challenges that we've had in the North American marketplace. The number of shares the company's had in issue, and being a penny stock is not favoured in the North American marketplace. So that was the first step of realigning the company for the next stage of growth. So that should allow us now to market to a number of institutions and funds in North America. We'll also be stepping up our marketing through Europe and UK. So I think short answer, we've got lots of news flow coming out. The nickel market is strong. We're stepping up our IR activity. So yes, there should be more shareholder and as a result, liquidity in the stock. Next question is around global inflation and how is Horizonte managing the cost pressures around the financing package. So I'll probably take this one. And we've actually got a couple of questions that say the same thing. So hopefully this answers 2 questions here. We announced last week that we've awarded $260 million worth of contracts and services. They are on budget. So if we look at our total capex makeup of the project, we're just over or just around half of our capex is awarded and locked in on budget. Yes, obviously we are seeing inflation in Brazil. Brazil is in the same situation that the global economy is in, and it's also a very busy construction market. So there is competition for the relevant contractors in our space. What are we doing to control that? A number of things. We've got a business optimization program that's been running since we approved the project. So we look at our engineering, we look at our quantities, we look at what we can optimize, what we can take out, where we can reduce steel, where we can reduce concrete, which obviously then reduces our costs and assists in bringing those back down in line with what our budget was. We've also talked about that Votorantim plant that has added savings to the original capex, and we also run a very rigorous competitive tendering process, which was very successful in that award of those initial $260 million worth of contracts. So that's how we've managed it to date. I will say that as we move into the second half of the year, a lot of the contracts are going to be local contracts, which obviously have labour, local input. So we will be seeing inflation coming into our costs. But it's also worth mentioning that when we raised that $630 million, we did have around $95 million of contingency and cost overrun built into our project financing. So that, combined with our business optimization and cost savings, and combined with the favorable FX that Simon has just talked about, should ensure that we can deliver this project on target and on budget. But obviously we're 5 months into a 24-month build, and we will obviously update the market accordingly. But to date, we're on budget and on schedule. Looking at the next questions, we've got a couple of questions here. Are we going to list in the US? I think not any immediate plan, but obviously as we build out our marketing into the US, we've already got a number of US institutions on the register, and we will look at that going forwards, but it's not a short-term objective. What is our next question? Why haven't you called Tesla for Vermillion? Interesting one. So look, we've had a lot of interest in Vermillion from battery manufacturers, auto manufacturers, and miners. Our view has always been that because Vermillion is at pre-feasibility stage and is unpermitted today, any transaction that you or we would negotiate, we're going to get a discount for. And we know how good the Vermillion asset is. We know how scarce these types of assets are. Our view is we've raised $25 million to advance it through the feasibility study. We're going to get a much higher valuation at the end of that process than we would get today. So look, we see value, and we think we can create much more value than we would create on an offtake with somebody today. And it's interesting to note some of these offtakes that are being negotiated with some of the larger OEMs, there's no money down up front. It's a take or pay offtake, and we don't really see that adding any value to the proposition at Vermillion today. But look, we are looking at transactions. If something compelling lands on our desk, we will clearly look hard at it. Let's see. Got a couple more talking about inflation. We'll take.
Yep. So there's a question here. The start of the full feasibility for Vermillion was Q2 this year. When do you anticipate this being complete in timing terms? It's a 24-month program that we're designing to undertake the flow sheets, do some pilot testing, some bulk sampling, right the way through to the economics and publishing the feasibility study. So we expect to have a fairly good feel for the project and be able to announce something in line with first production at Araguaia, which has always been the plan, so that we can move from first production at Araguaia, potentially second line straight away. At the same time, we'd be looking to partner and construct and move forward with the build phase at Vermillion.
Next question is around, obviously linked to the share consolidation. Is there a plan to move from AIM to the main market? We get asked this a lot. Our view is, if you look at AIM, there are a number of large producing mining companies like Atalaya, like Central Asian Metals. AIM works. It works for those companies. And in the short term, we don't see any significant value in moving to the main market at this stage, but that may change in 2 or 3 years' time. But our view at the moment is AIM is a good platform for us at this stage of development. Another question here: can the second line of Araguaia be accelerated? An interesting question. Look, we clearly have designs on doubling the capacity at Araguaia as quickly as we can. Everything that we've done to date is fully optimized for the second line. If we take the power line, all of the conductors that will be going up, the lines will be sufficient for both line 1 and line 2. The water pipeline has been designed for line 2. All of the layout of the process plant, the hatch furnace, the furnace building, even up until a couple of weeks ago, were being optimized so that you can bolt a second building next to it. We've obviously got the rotary kiln from the Votorantim plant. So look, it's clearly something that we are looking at. What shape or form that takes, we can't comment on today. Another question here. How do we ensure that Horizonte is not taken over for low value? It's an interesting question. Look, it's clearly obviously an area that we're working on as well. I think that we are trading well below our peer group today. We know that, and that's obviously something we're working on. I think the function of having three major shareholders in the form of Glencore, Orion, and La Mancha gives a level of protection. In the case of La Mancha and Orion, they've invested in this for the long term for many multiples on their entry point. So I think unless it is something absolutely compelling today, they're going to want to see the return on that investment. So I think that's a fairly good protection against that kind of situation developing. Next question. How frequently will we be having updates on construction? The aim is going forwards that we will, obviously you've seen the groundbreak news. We will be endeavouring to give regular construction updates as we go through, and ideally they will be quarterly updates. So that's the target. I think we're sort of coming towards the end. I think we've answered most questions there. So any other final questions?
Jeremy, that's great. Simon as well, thank you for addressing all of those questions that came in from investors this afternoon. And of course, if there are any further questions submitted today, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended for your review. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll publish those responses where it's appropriate to do so on the Investor Meet Company platform. Jeremy, perhaps for redirecting the investors on the call to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments to wrap up with, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's been a pleasure to be presenting today. As I said earlier, we are a fairly unique offering in terms of what Horizonte has today. We've got a tier 1 nickel project under construction in the form of Araguaia, fully financed. We've got Vermillion moving through to feasibility study. Between these two projects, we've got the ability to build out that scalable production base of between 50 to 60,000 tons of nickel. The nickel outlook for the midterm is looking extremely favourable. We're in a very good jurisdiction with strong ESG credentials. So I think this is going to be a very exciting time over the next 24 months as we grow this business into a producing nickel business. So thank you very much.
That's great. Jeremy, Simon, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to update investors this afternoon. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Horizonte Minerals PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session. So good afternoon to you all.